Hi everyone, my name is Oran. Welcome to my channel. It is my great honor to be here and share with you guys some of my thoughts and opinions on those great Mongolian masterpieces. And today I've chosen one of those greatest poems of all time, named Farewell Standing of Tegh, which is written by Tegh, who is a great Mongolian poet of the 20th century, and he was also well acclaimed as the great poet of the East, and he was also reputed to be a new pioneer of the 20th century's Mongolian poetry. He was admitted into Gorky Academy of Literature in Moscow, where he learned to philosophically innovate Mongolian modern poem. So some of his great masterpieces are Our Wish, Where I Was Born, Farewell Standing of Tegh, a poem of blind money. While these poems all received national awards. Well, some of you may wonder why I chose to start this kind of channel about Mongolian literature. Well, my answer is very simple. I want to create a new kind of voice, literary voice, through translation, through doing this kind of channel and sharing my thoughts about this beautiful literature. So this is my own typical way of cultural expression. I've recently translated this beautiful poem, remarkable piece of Tegh. Its original name is Тэхийн zogsool. So my translated version is The Farewell Standing of Tegh. Probably some of you may be befuddled by some of the ambiguity of my translation. So if you have further questions, you can just put it down on the comment below, and probably I will shoot another video to talk about your questions. The Farewell Standing of Tegh by translated by Oran. How soothing was the winter of that year. How daunting and tall was the mountain top, the farewell standing of Tegh. The distant and rugged place of umber-hued mountains, whose, however far away it is, its luxuriant thick base makes us a warm covering to spend the winter life. In the early scorching autumn, my father headed to the mountains. 3 herding households settled there during the wintry pasture in Hush. The summits surrounding the winter pasture are daringly tall. In the middle of the heights, the farewell standing of Tegh is even lofty. After ascending to the winter pasture, my father went for a hunt. After completing the wintry preparation, the other families engaged in some seasonal labors. The wintry weather in that delightful year was beyond utterance. The harmonious blend of snow and grass on the mountain was more than comfortable for winter life. In Ghost Mountains, the spring unfurled its splendor with unwavering precision. The time had come for the 3 nomadic families to leave the winter pasture and migrate along the rivers. In an early morning, my father called me in, then handed me a monocular. Then he said, "What is it up there on the farewell standing of Tegh? Behold." Then he had a deep sigh. I replied, "What was captured inside was a triangular peak that penetrated the clouds. Again, upon the foggy loftiness, an eagle was hovering over his nest, with the nearby peak well within its reach. The azure sky above embraced the eyes without a single wisp of cloud." My father then uttered, "Focus your vision as the farewell standing of Tegh." Again he repeated, "There is an earthling on the mountaintop. Find it out." There was a yankur with its rocked horn standing on the peak. Having appreciated the auspicious creature of the beautiful land, I was full of joy. Therefore, I was about to exclaim after saying, "A blackish Tegh is standing right there." My dad became dead silent and diminished to suck his pipe. Then he went inside the gate upon the news of the Yankır. All of our neighbors gathered at our place. My father then had seated himself for a while without refreshing himself with the milk tea, turning his back against us. He hacked his throat with melancholic mood, then started explaining the story behind the Tegh. We have been generously gifted with the blessings of the silver-topped mountains and hills. For the first time we have witnessed the Yankır standing upright on the eternal mountaintop. It was indeed the one that had been in Yamanos last year. It was nothing else but the unwavering Tegh that had stood upright on the original standing. The departing at the terminal of the birth is an inexorable animal law. The renouncing its homeland is an insurmountable bar. They said that the Yankır becomes incapable of standing the weight of its horns in the twilight of its existence. It also becomes unable to catch up the pace of its flock. They said it returns to the maternal mountain where it was born. The Yankır turns every stone to find out its motherly birthplace to lie down. They said that the Yankır scrambles the rocky mountain toward its top at the dusk of its days. Folk namers, therefore, call it as the farewell standing of Tegh. Days and nights, it stands persistently on the mountaintop till its last breath. It reminisces on its past days on the mountaintop. It also gives the blissful water a last joyful glance. It gazes at the arable pasture with delight. It casts one final look at its fellow flock. It looks back at its motherland one last time. Encumbered by the strong horse, it perishes off the magnificent peak. One member of the flock, therefore, is eternally lost from the colorful world. All the folks in our house listened quietly to the words of my father. The neighborly granny even felt compassion for the Yankır and shed tears. Since then, my father had been feeling blue. Thus, the continuing migration had been stagnant for a while. It was soon our turn for ship duty, as the three herding families take shifts, each responsible for tending to the flock every 3 days. Don't direct the ship to the higher area, exhorted my father. He sits himself outside to observe the mountaintop with his monocular every morning. Situated on the host's winter pasture, the three herding households positioned their girths into an auspicious triangular shape. The triangular mountaintop that attracts the common, the charcoal-colored Tegh, its wild tones reaching toward the sky. The sable eagle hovers right above the Tegh every single day. This picturesque scene had haunted my father's mind for many days. Again, this picturesque scene had attached the three herding families to the winter pasture for many days. One morning, my father came back from observing the mountaintop with his monocular. Upon one glance, he was having the milk tea joyfully. It finally went to the great beyond naturally, he said. Alas, the poor soul, poignantly murmured my granny. The benevolent three families started packing up the next morning. Both the folks and the herds set off together, leaving the dusty base behind. My father looked back at the farewell standing of Tegh one last time. Then he uttered to himself, "My birthplace, my homeland." How long-lasting was that typical winter of that year? How tall and soaring was that peak named the farewell standing of the Tegh? Dedicated to my beloved father, Bukti, a famous hunter. So the storyline of this poem, The Farewell Standing of Tegh, is very complete, and I simply divided it into 6 patterns. So it begins with the boy and his family, and also those other herding families. They went to a winter grazing area where they chose to settle down, for their livelihood and also their herds. And one day the boy saw a yankr, Mongolian wild goat, on the mountaintop called Farewell Standing of Tegh. And his father told everyone the story behind the Tegh. And all the three nomadic household stayed in the winter pasture. Although spring came, it was the time for them to go back, but they stayed. They prolonged their plan to stay in the area in order to accompany the yankr. And after the death of the yankr, all of them left the winter grazing area. So this is basically the storyline of the poem. Well, I don't want to narrate everything here in this poem, from its beginning line to the end of it, because it's very long and complicated. But if you are interested in the whole story and the whole poetic lines, you may download the PDF file below. And it's also my translated version. And again, if you have other, questions upon the lines, probably, or the content, you can comment down below. Well, I've chosen the most representative and most powerful line of this poem in order to present you guys, which is the part that tells the story of Tegh. This part is narrated by the boy, the speaker's father. He said, "I heard that the yankr becomes incapable of standing the weight of his horns in the twilight of his existence." Well, this line kind of speaks to us. Most of the time when we get old, right, we can feel the weight of a lot of things from all corners of our lives. The weight of some of our organs that doesn't work anymore, right? And probably the weight of the mental breakdown. This line really very naturalistic and true to the human's life, right? So it's when we read these typical line, it's just so common to all the human beings, so universal. Next, it also becomes unable to catch up the pace of his flock. It returns to the maternal mountain where it was born. Then yankr turns every stone to find out its motherly birthplace to lie down. Then the yankr scrambles the rocky mountain towards its top at the dusk of its days. Wow, so phenomenal. This line is very touching and very true, realistic. As the final stage of our days, probably we become unable to catch up the pace of the young people, right? And at least for Mongolians, it's very typical of Mongolian emotions, or I would say Mongolian time and space. We can feel, probably some of you may not want to go back to your homeland after struggling all the way in your lives. But the traditional typical Mongolian emotions here is very relative to these lines, because Mongolian, when they have struggled all of their lives in major cities, probably like New York, Boston, and they have these very strong, intensive emotions to their hometown, to their grassland. And at the end of the day, they want to go back to their mother land, the grassland, to spend their last moment of their lives. As personally speaking, also, I sometimes, I really want to go back to my homeland after 70s or 80s something. I really just want to breathe in the air of my hometown. So yeah, as a Mongolian, I feel this line is quite speaks to us, at least as Mongolians. But for any other ethnic groups in the world, probably they don't have this collective emotions as like Yonkers, going back to their homeland to gaze at the beauty of your motherland. I don't know. So that's the really realistic part here. The folk namers therefore call it as farewell standing of Tegh. And there is the reason why the title of this poem is Farewell Standing of Tegh. And the next few lines just powerfully describes and gives the reason why this typical mountaintop belongs to the Yangker. Days and nights, it stands persistently on the mountaintop till its last breath. It reminisces on its past days on the mountaintop. It also gives the blissful water a last joyful glance. It gazes at the arable pasture with delight. It casts one final look at its fellow flock. It looks back at its motherland one last time. So we can look at the images here, like past days, blissful water, arable pasture, fellow flock, motherland. So these images, very original images, natural images of this typical poem, actually part of Mongolian culture. The part of nomadic, traditional, very original type of Mongolian culture. We actually live off the waters, the rivers, in the vast grassland, vast steppe, and without water, there is no livelihood here. So the Yangker chose to give the blissful water a last joyful glance. So it's kind of expressing its gratitude to their motherly water. And again, the same for arable pasture and fallow flock, and of course the motherland. It's always good to be grateful for our fellows, our friends, those who accompanied us all along the way, just like the Yangker, who doesn't forget its team members, right, who have been with the journey of those prime years of Yangker. So it's very philosophical and universal to all the stages of human lives, right? So that's why this mountaintop is called the farewell standing of Yangker. He said, encumbered by the strong horns, it perished off the magnificent peak. One member of the flock, therefore, is eternally lost from the colorful world. Wow, that's so true. And yes, probably some of you guys would think, well, when I'm dead, probably nobody will remember me. I'm just a nobody, mediocre, and the world just doesn't remember me anymore when I'm dead. Probably this is very true for every one of us, but this poem kind of like wants to speak to us that you're the team members probably of your company, though that you work in, probably the team workers, team members of the community that you live in, right? So never forget you are a very important part of this world, of this colorful world. Well, another very important poetic lines that I want to bring up here is this one, which is also the part of the boy's father's narration. It goes like, the departing as the terminal of the birth is an inexorable animal law. The renouncing one's homeland is an insurmountable bar. Well, this is the harsh reality of our human beings, and including those other creatures, right? There is one day that we may die out and probably disappear forever from this world. But the most saddening, harsh reality is that we have to abandon our homeland. So this is also all very typical of Mongolian emotions. After, benefiting all life from their homeland, especially for Mongolian nomadic life. For example, our grass, the sheep, it provides us, right? We have been gifted so many from our nature, and we have been the child all our life of our nature, Mother Nature. But at the end of the day, we need to abandon everything and die out. So this is the very heartbreaking reality, but we also have to accept this, right? So from these very mesmerizing, captivating poetic lines, we can perceive easily, the philosophical ideas of the poet himself. And it kind of reminded me of the existential phenomenology in 1960s. Because this poem was written in 1968, so it's kind of speaks to that kind of philosophical period. So in existential phenomenology, we can't forget Heidegger, Sartre and Merleau-Ponty. They try to merge the phenomenology with the existentialism. So they examine how individuals exist in the world and how they find meaning within it. Especially in Heidegger's Being in Time is a seminal work in this area, exploring the nature of being in time. So what is the Mongolian type of existential phenomenology? So through a lot of phenomena of this poem, we can, the death of the Tegh, very much phenomenal scene of the Tegh falling off the mountain peak, right? Next would be another typical image, such as, like I said before, the past days, the blissful water, arable pasture, fallow flock, the motherland. So all of these typical phenomena actually drive us back to the typical four lines. The departing at the terminal of the birth is an inexorable animal law. The renouncing one's homeland is an insurmountable bar. So before our death, before the extinction of our existentialism, at that very typical moment, we think of who we are, right? But in Mongolian experience and existentialism, we can think of our typical homeland that we were born, which is the grassland, right? Typically, or Mongolian Gobi Desert. I don't know, just a very typical place that we were born, our birthplace. So at the end of the story, even the father, before leaving the winter pasture, he exclaimed, "My homeland, my birthplace," right? So this is all of these phenomena speaks very powerfully about the Mongolian existentialism, which is, fundamentally derived from the motherland. So yeah, we exist because we have our grassland behind us, right? So yeah, that is my analysis of existentialism in Mongolian experience. So again, this typical Mongolian sense of existentialism or existential phenomenology can be grasped through the repetitive lines, both from the beginnings and the ending. And it goes like, how soothing was the winter of that year, how daunting and tall was the mountaintop, right? And how long-lasting was that typical winter of that year, how tall and soaring was that peak named the farewell standing of the Tegh. So yeah, again, the author tried to emphasize the Mongolian typical experience in terms of existentialism. We exist because we have our own homeland. If we disappear, so probably our homeland will be left with no owners. Yes, of course, it will be left without any owners, but our values of being is deeply rooted in our grassland. So next, I want to talk about the poetic lines of Boyahulan that kind of belong to the literary realm of Romanticism. So in Western world, it was at its peak from approximately 1800 to 1815. So Romanticism was characterized by its emphasis on emotion, individualism, as well as the glorification of the past and nature. Therefore, in this poem, we can sense the delicate emotions of the author in the voice of a boy, right? The narration of nature, such as the silver-topped mountains and hills, the rocky peak, Tegh and sable eagle, they are also part of the praise of the nature. And also we can sense the double emotions of the speaker and the author. The boy's excitement after finding out the younker on the mountaintop, the boy's description of his father's emotional response on younker's status, and even the granny's emotions. These are the collective emotions and empathy of Mongolian upon the death of the Tegh. So this kind of collective response, emotional response to the nature, and excitement to the nature is also the part of, romantical language that has been depicted by Boyahulan. But this poem doesn't uphold individualism. This poem is more of a collective empathy, the collective nostalgia of returning to one's homeland. So it's not entirely romantic poem. It's part of that, but it's also distinct from that. Last but not least, I want to talk about the themes of this poem. Clearly, through the symbolic meaning of the farewell standing of Tegh, that is the death of the Tegh, we can sense the very deep scholar of Mongolians' vision of death or values of death. Clearly, Mongols today have scattered all over the world for their personal development or any other reasons, but they hold strong emotions to their roots. So the traditional Mongolian values of death is also similar to the Tegh after struggling for their whole lives. The Mongolian steppe is their final destination for eternal rest. So what is your conception of death? Death is a universal topic and it's very deep and it's very philosophical. So this theme also reminded me of Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Well, Emily Dickinson treated death as one of the, gentlemen, and he invited the speaker to a chariot, and they went all the stages of human's life. So in Emily Dickinson's recognition, death is about immortality and eternity. Or it can also be recognized as death is more than, it is nothing more than the death itself. You know, the life, when it's gone, is just gone. Again, The Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. In this drama, the main protagonist, Willie, he chose to die because he wanted to win the insurance money for his family, to fend for his family. So in this kind of deaths, it's more materialistic and realistic. So in our life, there is a variety of deaths. So from the analysis of the poems of Yaghlin, we can find the true meaning of Mongolian death, right? So this kind of death is deeply connected to their motherland, homeland, grassland. So what is your concept of death? Again, what is it? So it is the very universal topics among human beings. Yeah. So there's just a lot to talk about here through this poem, these magnificent poems that has a lot of themes and topics and perspective to analyze it. So that is for today. If you are interested in Yaghlin's other poems, please comment down below. Thank you.